We'd like to capture your minds right now. Take you a little bit higher.
This is Indie Media on Air for the week of March 26, 2007. I'm Bronwyn Malden with the Los Angeles Independent Media Center. Today we have the second part in a two-part series looking at the peace process in Northern Ireland. It's been 9 years since the Good Friday Peace Accords were signed and 5 years since the last power-sharing government in Northern Ireland was suspended. Elections for the Northern Ireland Assembly were held earlier this month, and today was a very important deadline for getting back to a local power-sharing government with both Republicans and Unionists participating. To help us understand what's happening in Northern Ireland today, we have in the studio with us Roy McCann. He's Public Relations Officer for Irish Northern Aid. Have I got that right?
Yes, that's correct.
Okay, Irish Northern Aid. Irish Northern Aid is an American-based group that supports the establishment of a democratic 32-county Ireland. And Roy was born and raised in Belfast, and he now lives here in Southern California. Roy, welcome to Indie Media on Air.
It's great to be here.
Also in the studio today, we have Lisa Elaine Scott. Lisa is an independent journalist and longtime activist here in Los Angeles whose work has appeared in the Irish Herald and also in Music Connection magazine. She's the director of 2 documentary films, Under 3 Strikes and The Ultimate Song. And she has her own media production company, Street Level Productions. And Lisa recently traveled to Northern Ireland to do research and interviews, and she produced the radio documentary we heard last week on Indie Media on Air, and that was called Peace and Politics in Northern Ireland. And Lisa, welcome to the show.
Thanks. Glad to be here.
Great. It is a little after 3 o'clock here on the west coast of the United States, which means it is 11 p.m. in Belfast right now, and a lot has happened today. In just a moment, we're going to speak to a member of the Northern Ireland Legislative Assembly. But first, Roy, can I get you to explain exactly what was today's deadline? What was that about?
Well, today, the leading parties in the north of Ireland, the Unionist Democratic Unionist Party, led by Ian Paisley, and the Republican Party Sinn Féin, led by Gerry Adams, they were to nominate the First and Deputy First Ministers, thereby triggering devolved government in the north of Ireland. Now, failure to do so meant that the Assembly would be dissolved and Plan B would be implemented. And Plan B was never laid out in terms, but effectively meant that the British and Irish governments would administer government in the north of Ireland if the parties failed to take up the opportunity presented to them as a result of the St Andrews Agreement. The DUP, in effect, asked for more time and they refused to nominate the minister. And to do so, they had to ask Sinn Féin, or Sinn Féin actually demanded that they talk to them face to face, something that they have not done so throughout the history of the conflict. They agreed to meet, they did meet, and today they did agree to set up government on May the 8th.
So today was pretty much a drop-dead deadline that
the British government have set drop-dead deadlines before. I think Ian Paisley was hoping that this time he could wing his way past it and perhaps they would again satisfy his prevarication. This time they seem to stand strong and say that there would be no special legislation brought in to delay the dissolution of the Assembly. And they made it quite plain to him. So they said if they could come up with a third way, that then, only then, with the agreement of all the other parties, they may bring in special legislation, and that is what has been agreed.
Okay. Well, let's turn now to Belfast, and we've got on the phone right now Paul Maskey. Paul was elected to the Northern Ireland Assembly earlier this month, representing West Belfast. He's with Sinn Féin. And Paul, thank you for being with us today.
My pleasure, thank you.
So can you tell us, from your point of view in Belfast, what happened today?
I think today has been a very historic day in regards with the island of Ireland. I think when you see Ian Paisley, as Roy quite correctly points out, that Ian Paisley, who has refused all along for many, many years to ever sit down or be seen or actually even have a meeting with a member of Sinn Féin, has done so today. this has been beamed live around the world, and many people who now living on the island of Ireland are actually delighted to see this day happening, because this will allow us to move into the future. This will allow us to sort out all the problems that we have here in the north of Ireland, indeed on the island of Ireland, and this will allow us to move for the future and have a better, stable relationship from both sides of the community for all of our children within the island of Ireland.
So, Paul, you were elected to the Legislative Assembly, and there was some question going into today whether the Assembly was going to be meeting and whether you were going to have a paycheck.
That's correct, and we've had to, but we've been faced with this on many occasions in the past, and I think this is something that we've actually had to stand up and be very strong, and to push the British and Irish governments to set deadlines, because first of all it was Sinn Féin who actually asked the British and Irish governments, if this election isn't up and running, if we have the election, and if the Assembly isn't up and running and we don't have power, and then all MLAs who are elected to the Assembly should be sacked, because why should anybody be being paid for not doing a job that they are paid to be doing? So it was actually Sinn Féin put that legislation down. Maybe other parties got afraid of that. Maybe they were afraid of not having their paychecks at the end of the day. So maybe that's why we're looking for. We're going to have an assembly up and running and be powering in government for ourselves within the next 6 weeks.
So, what does that mean in terms of next steps? What should we expect to see happening in 6 weeks?
Well, between this next 6 weeks, you will see Sinn Féin and DUP sitting down on many occasions throughout this period, along with other parties, to make sure, because there is many issues affecting us within society. We have people who live in deprived areas and working class areas. We need to get their problems sorted out. We need to address the health and education problems the way every other society. But what we will be doing is we will be sitting down preparing for government. I think that's the main thing. We will be sitting in the same rooms with each other, talking and debating and what programs would be called preparation for government programs. And I think that's very, very important, because when we are ready to run this country, for example, this part of the island, north of Ireland, we in 6 weeks will have been sat down, we will have worked all it out, and hopefully come the 8th of May, we will be ready to hit the road running, because we will have worked through all these projects regarding government, and this is where we want to be doing, because it is very, very important that all parties in the north of Ireland sit down and work out collectively where we can go for the future, because it's what the people voted for on the 7th of March. People demanded that we sit down together and when we work it out and we go into government, because all of our futures rely on Irish people govern Ireland for ourselves. Because what we don't want any longer is British direct rule ministers coming into the north of Ireland, maybe flying in for one day and then flying back to England again, trying to make all the decisions what affect us. They do not live here. They shouldn't be here. So it's better that Irish people actually start to govern their own country for ourselves.
And when I was looking on the internet earlier today, I saw an image of Ian Paisley and Gerry Adams. That's Ian Paisley of the DUP, Gerry Adams of Sinn Féin, sitting down together at a table in a room together and talking. Help me understand how important that image is.
Oh, that's a massive image, and to me, what I would have to say is, and even because I have young children myself, that is a massive positive image that has been beamed all around the world through internet and on live news channels as well. And I think that, to me, highlights the importance of Gerry Adams and Ian Paisley sitting around the table, because what we need to go for, that is the future. Ian Paisley isn't the youngest leader in the world, so he may be coming up to retirement age. But however, at the end of the day, he's made a courageous decision, what I believe. It's a decision that he should have took many years ago. But however, he has taken it now, and we need to work together so we can all move in together into the future together in a more positive way, in a much more positive manner.
Great. Well, Paul, thank you so much for being with us today. I know it's late where you are, so thanks for staying up and taking the time to talk to us.
My pleasure. Thank you very much, and good luck to Roy.
Slán.
Bye-bye.
Bye, Paul. That was Paul Maskey. He was elected to the Northern Ireland Assembly earlier this month. He represents West Belfast, and he's with the Sinn Féin party. So, Roy, let me turn to you. What's your reaction to today's events?
Well, as an Irish Republican, I'm not jumping up and down for joy that day will come when we finally do get our independence, total independence, and see the reunification of the country. And we do have our United Ireland. But I do share Paul's sense of history here, and it is a monumental decision. Ian Paisley, it was once said, if the word no was removed from the English language, the man would be speechless. It was also, it's amazing how far the man has come. Paul talked about the image, and you mentioned it yourself. What's more important is the image. This doesn't just send around the world, but what it's the image that he is sending to his own people, I think. And the mindsets that we often talk about, the unionists used to call for IRA decommissioning. And we used to say, well, you need to decommission the mindsets in Ireland. Guns are only used by people who have a mindset to use them. And what has to be decommissioned is the old mindsets. 12th of July last year, less than 1 year ago, Ian Paisley stood in front of a crowd and said, compromise, accommodation, and the word surrender are the road to final irrevocable disaster. No unionist who is a unionist will go into partnership with IRA Sinn Féin. They're not fit to be in partnership with decent people. They're not fit to be in the government of the North of Ireland, and it will be over our dead bodies that they'll ever get there.
That's strong words.
Strong words, and this is less than a year ago. So how far that man has come is monumental, and the image of him sitting today with his archenemy, Gerry Adams, talking about the future on Ireland for our children. Well, that is the sense of history that you've got today.
Well, let's talk a little about history, because I want to put this into context, what's happened today. I remember a time when it seemed like Northern Ireland was in the news all the time, and it was what you would see was the aftermath of bombings and violence and shootings, and but we haven't seen a lot of that in the media. We don't see a lot of coverage of any kind of peace process or kind of the positive things that may have been happening in recent years. But let's go back a bit. I'm looking at a map of the British Isles sitting in front of me, and what I'm seeing is there's a really big island here, and it's got England and Scotland and Wales kind of all together. And off to the west of that is a smaller island, but it's divided in two. And the bottom part, the bigger part, is marked the Republic of Ireland. And then there's a section of it that's, I don't know, about a third or a quarter of the land mass there, and that's marked Northern Ireland. And what I'm particularly noticing here is that this part that's Republic of Ireland, that's one color, indicating that's a different country. And then everything that is Scotland, England, Wales, and Northern Ireland, they're all another country, and they're the same color. So tell me how it is that we've gotten to this place where there's this tiny piece of an island that was Ireland, and it's the same color as the English part and not the same color as Ireland on the map.
With respects, we would probably need a couple of hours to go through that. However, to summarise, Ireland was partitioned in 1921. And there was a limited form of independence granted to 26 counties, which became the Irish Free State. It was partitioned on a sectarian head count, and that was that Britain held on to the 6 northeastern counties because there was predominantly a unionist, and I have to say there is religious connotations. They were predominantly unionist from the Protestant faith. And Britain held on to that part of the north of Ireland because it was the industrial heartland. It was the economic boon of Ireland. And Britain carved up the island against the wishes of the majority of the Irish people to enable those unionists in the north of Ireland who supported British governments and give them a government in the north of Ireland. It was called a Protestant government for a Protestant people. Since 1921, there have been many insurrections. The Irish Republican Army have had many armed campaigns to try and reunite the country. Successfully been able to move this process along to where we have a a semblance now where there will be some sort of all-Ireland bodies, not full independence, but the recognition now is that we have to make this Ireland that we are pressing for, this Ireland. It has to be a new Ireland, a modern Ireland, one which embraces all cultures, one that a person can feel British in if they want, an Irish in, and yet we've got to build a new Ireland where people's rights, entitlements, religious, cultural identities are protected. But we believe that the partition of Ireland is the root of all the conflicts which have been there since the island was first, since Britain first came to our country. And so it's these dynamics that are pressing forward, the peace process and the political process, to finally push for an Ireland where all identities are recognised.
Okay. Just a reminder to listeners, you're listening to Indie Media on Air on KPFK 90.7 FM Los Angeles, 98.7 FM Santa Barbara. And I'm talking to Roy McCann with Irish Northern Aid here in Southern California. Also in the studio, Lisa Elaine Scott, filmmaker and activist. So what happened today, or what's going to happen in 6 weeks from today, is not that those two pieces of the island are going to suddenly become one of Ireland. There's still going to be two separate governments, but Northern Ireland will have its own government separate from the British government. Am I understanding that right?
Correct. It's kind of like what Scotland and Wales have evolved in now. There is a devolved assembly in each of those countries. The Northern Irish Assembly will be set up, and it will be people born in the north of Ireland who are making decisions for the people of the north of Ireland. Paul alluded to the arrogant British ministers who fly in for a day and they lay down the law on behalf of Westminster and then they take off. And they don't care about the day and daily trials and tribulations of the people living there. So the emphasis has to be try and get the institutions up in the north of Ireland. But for nationalists and Republicans like myself, the overriding factor is that there's an all-Ireland dimension to this, that there are 12 areas of cooperation, that there is a council set up to deal with these. And the hope is from Republicans is that with unionists being drawn into this, saying that there is no fear, there is economic benefits here for the whole island. We're a small island of 5 million people. We need to use the resources on the island. It makes common sense. Like you say, look at the map. We are separate and distinct from Britain. Maggie Thatcher once tried to say we're as British as Finchley. The hunger strikers proved that wrong. We're not as British as Finchley, and the very fact that the Democratic Unionist Party now are calling for the same tax rate in the north as exists in the south shows we're not as British as Finchley. So our hope is that these all-Ireland bodies, the island working together in harmony, cultural and religious, as I say, identities being protected, that there will be an evolution towards a united Ireland. It makes more sense. Pull down the borders, pull down the mindsets, pull down the things that have divided us in the past.
All right. Now I want to go back and hear a few voices from Belfast, some official voices, some official statements that were made earlier today. We've got recording an excerpt of a statement from Ian Paisley. He's with the Democratic Unionist Party. Those are the folks who, Roy, am I got this right? They want Northern Ireland to remain a part of Britain.
Sure.
So let's hear what Ian Paisley had to say earlier today.
Our goal has been to see devolution returned in a context where it can make a real and meaningful improvement in the lives of all the people of this part of the United Kingdom. On the 7th of March, the Unionist community gave us a mandate to deliver on our pledges. On Saturday, the DUP executive overwhelmingly endorsed a motion committing our party to support and participate fully in government in May of this year. This is a binding resolution. In the past, the government has set arbitrary deadlines, but now, as laid out in our resolution, we as a party have agreed the timing, the setting up of and the working of the institutions of government. Today we have agreed with Sinn Féin that this date will be Tuesday, the 8th of May 2007. As the largest party in Northern Ireland in the political field, we are committed to playing a full part in all the institutions and delivering the best future for all of the people of Northern Ireland.
Well, Roy, what do you say to that?
That's very encouraging words. As I said to you before, to hear them coming from Ian Paisley is it's tremendous that he is finally, you know, he's on the road to Damascus, I would say. He's 80-year-old and he's finally on the road to Damascus. But we must move away from the squabbles of the past. You know, the Irish Republican Army have been on ceasefire since 1996. They've decommissioned their weaponry. People have moved on. We're leaving a legacy here. We're talking about building a legacy, a new Ireland where people can feel free to work, to, again, profess their cultural and identities and go and live a life which is what the rest of the world is able to offer. One of peace, freedom and democracy. And it's about time that Ian Paisley joined the rest of us in building that new Ireland.
All right, now let's turn to Gerry Adams and hear what he had to say also earlier today.
The relationships between the people of this island have been marred by centuries of discord, conflict, hurt and tragedy. In particular, this has been the sad history of Orange and Green. Ach tá tús mói, tús nua on, anish, the Codjija. Now there's a new start with the help of God. Sinn Féin is about building a new relationship between Orange and Green and all the other colours, where every citizen can share and have equality of ownership of a peaceful, prosperous and just future. There are still many challenges, there are still many difficulties to be faced. But let us be clear. The basis of the agreement between Sinn Féin and the DUP follows Ian Paisley's unequivocal and welcome commitment to support and participate fully in the political institutions on May the 8th.
Roy, that was Gerry Adams. He's with Sinn Féin. And he used the phrase orange and green. Mm-hmm. Can you explain that briefly?
Well, the orange is best known from the Orange Order, which was established in response to the United Irishmen, who were actually, ironically, led by a Presbyterian named Wolfe Tone, and they were a band which sought to break the link with Britain. And the Orange Order was set up to protect Protestant and British interests in the north of Ireland. The conflict between Orange and Green has been a symptom of British rule in Ireland. The sectarian conflict has been carefully fostered by Britain to maintain their influence in Ireland. And yet now, when the British in 1984 said they no longer had any strategic interest in the north of Ireland, we are left with the Orange and Green resolution of that ancient conflict. So these are what Gerry Adams is addressing. We must find common cause. We share this island, we share this tiny bit of the north of Ireland, and we must come to agreement on how we can get beyond the old sectarian barriers and build a new country in which our children can prosper in.
All right. I want to bring Lisa Elaine Scott into our conversation. Lisa, you recently traveled to Belfast to do research on cross-community organizing, did interviews with folks on both sides of the conflict. Mm-hmm. You created the documentary we heard last week on Indie Media On Air, and I know you're also working on some other projects about Northern Ireland. I'm curious, from an American perspective, what did you learn from being there that was kind of new to you or unexpected?
Well, I've been following the conflict and studying Northern Ireland and Irish history for a long time, and I cannot tell you how unprepared I was to find the level of sectarian division in Belfast. I've been throughout all of the north, all of Northern Ireland. But this last trip, I spent about 2 weeks in Belfast. So I really got a feel for it and saw things that, as I said, I really was not prepared for. You think coming from LA, a very diverse community, and we certainly have our lines that, when we cross, culture may be a little different. But here, literally, there are many people from either community who will not step foot into the other's community. There are what are called peace walls, which is a very interesting term. The locals there have come to call them interfaces. And these walls, the longest being in Belfast, runs about 4 miles long, and it serves to separate the Protestant community from the Catholic community. And
you're saying this is a physical wall, like in the middle of a street?
It's tremendous. It's about 25 feet tall, and it's
big.
It's big. This interface actually can bring conflict to it. If there's rumors going through one community about an action that that the other side might be taking, they'll go to the wall. Where children will start throwing stones over. Sometimes there's incendiary devices that will be thrown from one side to the other. So these activists that I met with from both sides, from both communities, both Catholic and Protestant, are working to try to keep peace on these interfaces, and not only keeping peace, but building relationships so that, as Roy was referring to, this new society where, people see themselves as all being from Belfast. The folks find themselves or feel divided, and that's something that these activists are trying to change.
Great. We're going to come back in just a minute and continue this discussion about the peace walls and cross-community organizing in Northern Ireland, and about the exciting news of what's happened there today and what we expect to happen about 6 weeks from now. You're listening to Indie Media on Air on KPFK, 90.7 FM Los Angeles, 98.7 FM Santa Barbara, and we will be back in just a bit. All right, we are back with Indie Media on Air on KPFK. I am talking today in the studio with Roy McCann. He is a public relations officer with Irish Northern Aid, and also with Lisa Scott, an activist and independent journalist who has been doing work in Northern Ireland. And I am Bronwyn Malden, your host. Let me get back to where we left off before we went to the break. We were talking about the peace walls. I have to tell you, I'm kind of stunned. It's kind of surprising. As you said, Lisa, we certainly have our communities and certainly have neighborhoods and places where people know not to cross the street, not to go there. But other than the freeways we've got here that divide, we don't have physical things to divide these communities from each other. Do you guys know when these walls initially were built? Is this a new thing? Has it been around a while? You grew up in Belfast, Roy? Is that something you knew when you were a kid?
Oh, absolutely. You would drive past the peace walls, and obviously, like anything else, when you do it then daily, you don't even realise they're there, and you don't know whether they're there to keep you in or to keep the other crowd out. To be honest, the peace walls are a necessary evil, or were a necessary evil during the years of conflict. And yet there was no sense of safety from them, because as became aware, we believed in on our side of the divide, the nationalist side of the divide, the gates of the peace wall could be opened at opportune moments by British security forces, and a lot of what subsequently has come out is there's a lot of collusion between forces of the state and unionist death squads. So these peace walls really they give some sort of sense of security to people who are living close to them, where they weren't getting petrol bombs lobbed into their home and getting their windows broken with stones every night by people from the other side. I look at the peace walls as a legacy of British rule in Ireland. Division, segregation, hatred, and this is what the peace walls are. They're put up to keep two communities who Britain always used against each other to protect their interest in Ireland. Like I said earlier, and the peace walls will come down when the mindsets are decommissioned, and I believe we made a good start on that today.
Let me just let folks know we're going to be inviting listeners to join the discussion about 10 minutes from now. We'll be taking your calls. And let me announce the number. It is 818-985-5735 if you would like to join us here, ask some questions to our guests here today. Lisa, when you were there doing interviews, you did go on both sides of these peace walls and interviewed folks on both sides of the conflict. Tell me what that was like, kind of as an American, as an outsider going back and forth. What was your experience?
When talking to people that work in these cross-community organizations, so that means that there are folks from both sides of the conflicts. Many of them are ex-combatants. Ex-combatants play a huge role in the peace process. These are folks who, on either side, they're either Republican, they would be, former IRA members, who some, spent time in prison, and then on the other side, they would be ex-loyalist. Probably UDA would be the organization, that the Ulster Defense Association that they would have been a part of. So these were combatants. They saw themselves as part of a war. These are folks who decided that an armed struggle was not the way to bring about, their goals. Okay, and each community has very valid, different goals. And what they taught me, they're coming together and recognizing that to try to change each other's opinions, that's not the way. They need to listen to one another and understand and share experiences.
And you got up very early this morning and made some phone calls to Belfast and talked to some folks that you had talked to when you were there. One of the folks that you called this morning was Owen O'Neill. He is the director of Radio Fáilte, an Irish language radio station that's in Belfast. And we've got, let's hear what he had to say.
Yeah.
The basic thing was nobody expected this. All the mood music for the last 2 days has been negative. It's all been about how the DUP were trying to pull out of this. They were having cold feet. And even from the statements that they were issuing and from the way they were talking, and also from the British government and the Irish government, that they were sort of and and the DUP, we might have to accept this and whatever. So it seemed that the DUP were going to get their way and that they weren't going to go into government, and basically that the British and Irish governments would just tow along with that rather than challenge them. So people didn't expect this morning. And that's, you could hear audible sighs as this happened this morning, because it's very, very eventful. I mean, think of the comparison with Mandela and de Klerk. That's the comparison which most people here are making. These are two people who have been central to the conflict here, who have now, for the first time, and really because of the DUP refusal to meet Sinn Féin, but for the first time, they've sat down at a table, they had an hour-long meeting. They came out, and the spoken language which was both generous and at the same time forthright, and they weren't just playing for the media. I think people are somewhat taken aback, absolutely delighted for the most part, and I think that there's a sense of very, very positive step forward which was not expected. There was no shaking hands, but it wouldn't have meant anything anyway, because there were so many other significant and real and long-term things which happened today that shaking hands would have been somewhat superfluous, really. I think it's difficult not to feel positive about today. It's difficult for anyone on the island of Ireland not to feel positive about today.
And that was Owen O'Neill. He's director of Radio Fáilte, an Irish-language radio station in Belfast, responding earlier today to the big news of the day that there will be moving forward in 6 weeks toward a devolved government. Lisa, you talked to him.
Yeah, I talked to several people despite the 8-hour time difference, but it was well worth getting up for. And, everybody that I spoke with was so excited, shocked. People didn't expect to see this. No one has ever seen Paisley and Adams sitting together like this, talking. The fact that they didn't shake hands, I thought was very interesting. And I thought it was interesting that Owen was willing to let that go. I thought that perhaps it would have been a good sign that they would have been able to shake hands, but we're not there yet. That just shows you what we're dealing with here. These two have never, when they are in public together, they don't make eye contact. They've never spoken. So this was a big deal, and people were really excited. Despite the deadline, the fact that the deadline had come and gone without the executive being formed, they were nobody expected this. That was what was so interesting about it. People were just flabbergasted.
Roy, would you agree with that, Roy? Is this unexpected, what happened today?
Oh, like I said, the man he's come a long way. Another one of his famous quotes is he once said he'd rather be British than fair. So, that is what is so remarkable, to see a man that spent his whole life saying no, finally say maybe, or, we will do it. It's just incredible, and that's why everybody is. It was something that was unforeseen. I think most of us, and my friends will laugh and say I'm always optimistic on when I'm talking about the peace process. But I think it was quite a shock to see this third way. I think most of us really believed that it would be Plan B, and that Paisley would find a way to say no, and he wouldn't be able to bring his party with him. For him to sit at the same table with Gerry Adams today is kind of, how can you, it's like David Duke sitting down with Nelson Mandela or Jesse Jackson. That is how monumental it really was.
Mm-hmm. Let me ask you, Roy, you are part of an organization that's here in the United States called Irish Northern Aid. Is that correct?
That's correct.
Can you tell me about what Irish Northern Aid is, the mission, what you guys do?
Irish Northern Aid was set up in 1970, and it was to give support to those families of political prisoners in the north of Ireland. Those we would obviously. The conflict arose through a sense of injustice. The Irish Republican Army rearmed, reorganised, and there was a campaign to end British rule in Ireland and end what we consider the root cause of all trouble in Ireland. Those prisoners who went to jail, they were fallen volunteers. Those families obviously got no help or subsistence from the British. So an American organisation was formed to help support the families of that. With the end of the conflict, with the release of the prisoners, Irish Northern Aid has continued to work for peace and justice in the north of Ireland to make sure that the Republican position and their philosophy has been heard. And some of our greatest achievements have been obviously working with other Irish organisations to get Gerry Adams a visa so he could come in here and present an alternative view to one which was rife in the media, and that was that there was a terrorist campaign waged by the Irish Republican Army and a one-sided media analogy of what was going on in Ireland. So Irish Northern Aid have worked steadily to do that. We're very large in Southern California. In fact, we hold commemorations to honour those who have died for Irish freedom. We help raise money for... There was, as you remember, the Holy Cross when the little Catholic children were prevented from going to school. We raised funds for that. Irish Northern Aid supported the McBride Principles, which was asking American companies before they invest in Ireland to make sure there was no discrimination in employment. So we've been very proactive in making sure that the Irish conflict has been properly... the Americans get properly educated on what the conflict was about in Ireland. I hope you don't mind if I put a little plug in here for Irish Northern Aid in Orange County are holding their 1916 Easter Rising commemoration, which they've held for 40 years. And this year it's been held at Mile Square Regional Park in Fountain Valley, California, and that'll be held on Sunday, April the 8th at 12 p.m. So I hope you don't mind me giving a little plug for that.
All right. Thanks. You're listening to Indie Media on Air on KPFK 90.7 FM Los Angeles, 98.7 FM Santa Barbara. We're inviting you to join the conversation. You can reach us at 818-985-5735. That's 818-985-KPFK. And we do have a caller, Mohammed. Are you there?
Yes, I'm here, and I want to thank you, you and your guests, for allowing me to enter your waves here. But I'd just like to mention to the listening public, especially the non-Latino public, if they're not aware that Mexico owes great gratitude to the Irish people. During the Benito Juarez struggle for independence, the Irish Brigade of American soldiers who defected to Benito Juarez, and every year the Mexican government honors the Irish San Patricios Brigade and the Irish government, the Irish people, for their contribution to the Mexican Revolution under Benito Juarez. And another thing, the struggle in Northern Ireland is the same struggle that we as Chicanos and Mexicans have been struggling to liberate Aztlán from California to Texas, and we are doing it now. And if somebody goes out and smells the coffee, we are taking over without having to fire one single shot in anger. So the struggle in Ireland and Palestine and in Aztlán and in Mexico is all the same. And I want to say solidarity to all the Irish people in Northern Ireland.
Oh, well, that's Irish people have gone around the world of fighting many struggles from Spain to Mexico, and even here in the US, the Irish have fought for freedom and peace and justice in those places.
And another thing, a lot of people don't know that Iman de Valera was half Spanish. During the Michael Collins and Iman de Valera struggle, the Bloody Easter Sunday, but Iman de Valera was half Spanish, and please correct me if I'm wrong. And please, all my solidarity on behalf of all the Mexicans, we owe gratitude to Irish brothers and sisters.
Well, I appreciate that, and I know de Valera was born here in the US, so it wouldn't surprise me that he had some good blood in him. Hopefully the Irish conflict and the resolution of that conflict will provide other areas in the world with some sort of a platform, a program for you're looking at their conflicts and finding a way for resolution of age-old enmities and anger and strife.
Can I ask you one last question, sir?
Real quick.
Yes. The question is that is Northern Ireland becoming part of a liberated zone from British occupation? And please correct me. There are some Protestant Irish who are also understand the true history of the Catholic Irish. So not all Protestants are against the Catholics.
No, it's very true that within Sinn Féin itself, we have there are members of the people who have professed the Protestant faith who are members of Sinn Féin. Billy Leonard particularly is an elected councillor in Coleraine. We'd love to get away from the religious aspect of the conflict. Republicanism is not about religion or Catholicism or Protestantism. In fact, Republicanism was founded, Irish Republicanism I'm talking about, was founded by a Protestant, a man called Wolfe Tone, who wanted to see the union of Catholic, Protestant in the centre, and we hold that there as a basic tenet of Irish Republicanism, and that is what we're working forward towards, and this is why we are moving with this political process and have taken the brave steps to address unionist concerns. Sinn Féin have appointed a person that is directly responsible for reaching out to the Protestant and unionist community and letting them see that they have nothing to fear from Irish Republicanism or from a united Ireland.
Thanks for your call, Mohammed.
Thank you.
Thanks for joining us. If you want to join the conversation, the number is 818-985-5735. Let me ask you, do you think, Roy, that American media coverage of Northern Ireland has been generally accurate and fair? You kind of touched on this a little bit earlier.
Yeah, I did. And I got to be honest with you. I believe that the media, well, not only in the United States, but in Ireland itself, should hang their head in shame over their coverage of the conflict. Like I said, it was always referred to as a violent sectarian squabble between two opposing traditions, with the British being the peacemaker. And now, as we know, the British were involved in the conflict, operating loyalist murder gangs, and with the murders of Pat Finucane and Rosemary Nelson and the subsequent cover-ups and the Dublin and Monaghan bombings in 1973, the British government were involved in the struggle right up to 10 Downing Street. And there had to be some sort of this conflict resolution that we're involved in. There had to be some recognition of Britain's role played in this conflict. There have been a few brave journalists, not all journalists, but a few brave journalists who have taken the role to really go to Ireland and actually uncover the stories there. But the majority of them, as we know, sat getting briefings from British intelligence, drinking wine and eating cheese in London. And it's, if journalism's about uncovering the truth, the people who covered the war in the north of Ireland failed miserably.
All right, we've got another caller join us. Ben, welcome to KPFK.
Thank you. Thank you for letting me enter the conversation. I'd like to ask your guest, what is his opinion on how the Irish struggle has been in comparison to the African struggle with African people in the diaspora, but particularly African people on the continent of Africa, and how those both relate. And also, do Irish people consider themselves Caucasian, white, or do they consider themselves to be a people of the Germanic offshoots of the ancient Germanic people? And I'll take your answer out there.
Thanks, Ben.
I believe that, again, the Irish conflict is symbolic of a lot of conflicts where people who have been oppressed and living under the rule of the British Empire or all their colonial masters have struggled for their independence and for equality. And obviously, African nations have been under the whip of the British Empire for many years. We were the first colony, and hopefully we'll be the last one to get their independence from the British Empire. As relation to what we describe ourselves as, we're part of. We guess we would consider ourselves part of the ancient Celts tradition. We're a mix-up of the Nordic people and the Celts, and a colour in Ireland today. I don't think Ireland is becoming fast a mixed mass of racial ethnicity. So it's great to see.
All right, and we've got another caller with us, Cheo from Bellflower.
Hi.
Welcome to KPFK.
Yes, I'm Mexican from Mexico, and we have a monument in Mexico City to St. Patrick's Brigade, and we're very grateful to the Irish people. And all I can say is, whatever you do, it's good to reach across. I saw the Pakistanis and the Indians the other day negotiating in spite of the train that was blasted. And we see it in Nicaragua, the Contras and the Sandinistas. So when the Irish all get together and have the big reunion and the big fiesta, we're ready to celebrate. Thank you.
All right, thanks for your call.
And that will be a day worth waiting for. I'll be celebrating with you.
Let me ask you, Roy, what kind of, do you think there are, you live here in the U.S., you grew up in Belfast, and so you must know a lot about what Americans know and don't know about Ireland and about the conflict there. Any kind of misconceptions that you constantly have to correct?
Well, I think I already alluded to the political aspect of and the type of media coverage of the conflict in relation to Britain's role in the conflict and the perpetuation of the sectarian struggle. I believe Americans, with obviously the great tradition and relationships between our islands, I've found Americans that have, particularly those Irish Americans, to be quite enlightened and been able to read for themselves and come to a understanding of the nature of the conflict, the historical nature of the conflict. And I've been very impressed with Irish Americans and their overall general support for the Irish struggle, and particularly in these peace processes that have gone on. Americans have reached out, and without the guidance of Irish American groups like Ancient Order Hibernians, the Irish American Unity Conference, and indeed Irish Northern Aid, Brehon Law Society, they all work together to bring Gerry Adams and pressure the different parties here to take an active role. And it's only since the American government have taken an active role and stopped supporting the old British status quo, it's only when they did that we were able to move our peace process along, and we got to the stage now where it's a historic compromise on the island.
All right. Thanks so much. And thank you. That was Roy McCann of Irish Northern Aid, who was here in the studio with us today. Also want to thank Lisa Elaine Scott of Street Level Productions. Both of you, thanks for joining me in the studio today. We also talked to Paul Maskey, who was a Sinn Féin member of the Northern Ireland Assembly for West Belfast. I want to thank my engineer, Jose Juan Bustamante, also producer Alan Minsky. I'm Bronwyn Malden of the Los Angeles Independent Media Center. If you'd like to comment on the show, please drop me a line at radioimc@gmail.com. And please join us again next week and every Monday at 3 p.m. for Indie Media on Air. Please keep it tuned right here to KPFK 90.7 FM Los Angeles, 98.7 FM Santa Barbara, and streaming globally at kpfk.org.
And this year Lockdown's howling, share the bar, mandolin, for they are cracked to